Dude, what the fuck?
What the fuck?
What the fucking fuck?
What did I just watch?
Jesus fuck. Hey, welcome back to Movies Good, Internet Bad. I'm Corey. That's Shane. And if you can't tell by that intro, we just watched episode 7 of season 2 of Severance. And, Shane, I normally say I need your help to make sense of all this, but I actually mean it this time. I, I am so confused after everything that just happened. Uh, we did some research and we're going to try to break it down and help you all get through it the same way. So, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please go ahead and do so. We break down Severance every week. We're having a ton of fun doing it, and thanks to everybody who's subscribed already and joined us on this journey. Uh, Shane, you have had the unfortunate task of trying to piece this breakdown together. But before we get into that, just what are your general thoughts overall on this episode?
I thought this was so creatively done. The cross cutting between the different timelines was unbelievable.
Yeah,
Some of the creative choices in how they shot it, some of the past stuff looked like it was kind of shot on film, and then they did some montagey stuff that looked like it was really shot on film too. I don't
yeah.
know if they actually shot on film for some of this stuff, but I would suspect that they did. Um, the cinematography, this is what happens when you get a cinematographer to direct an
Ooh,
episode, and wow, just extremely creative, devastating, so many crazy reveals but crazy questions at the same time.
yeah,
I feel like we just learned so much, and we kind of pieced together what's going on, but there's still so many questions out there about where this is all going. But
yeah.
I was blown away by this. This was, I think, the this is where it really takes a step up for me. Like, this show has been great at reveals and mystery and all
Mhm.
of that stuff, but like this is where it really like became more artistic for me.
I agree 100%. I felt like they went very avant garde with this
Yeah.
episode, and that's a risk, and it doesn't always pay off. But I think it paid off in spades here.
Yeah.
It was just absolutely terrific. There were several moments in the episode where I literally said out loud, "Okay, they're just showing off now." When it came to
Yeah.
the compositions and the cinematography and the use of light, the use of shadow, just oh my god,
There
so
was one
clever.
transition where it was Gemma, it was close up on her eyes, and
Mhm.
then like the lighting switched and got cold and then
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
dark, and I was like, man, this is just intense.
Would you say that it became a cold harbor, Shane?
A
Yeah,
little
maybe.
bit.
Ugh,
Is that a
yeah,
good segue into our breakdown?
I think it is. Yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
overall, amazing episode. Let's just get
Yeah.
that out of the way first, right?
Yeah.
And
Corey,
now
you're
let's.
supposed to appreciate all episodes equally. Come on.
I'm afraid I can't do that, man. When especially when one is as good as this one is. I
It's
mean,
true. It's true.
but let's try to piece it
Let's
together
try
and
it.
make some sense out of all this.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna break this down into the three main timelines, and we'll talk
Okay,
a little bit about the cross cutting. But if it cross cuts so much that if I just go like scene by scene, it's just gonna give us all whiplash. So
it's all over
I'll
the
break it
place. Yep.
down into Gemma on the testing floor, which is
Okay.
something we finally got to see.
Yep.
Um, Gemma and Mark's origin story,
Hmm.
and then the sort of present day Ragabi and Devon story as well. So we'll start with the testing floor because that was really the meat of it. We've been
Yeah.
hearing about the testing floor forever, and we finally get to see it. And the way that I kind of made sense of this is, well, first off, we start with a very important line, which we'll come back to later, which Gemma is getting her blood drawn, and the nurse says, "Gemma, where did you go?" Which
Yeah.
is a nice little full circle moment that we'll touch on later. But I
Yep.
wanted to point that line out specifically. But essentially, we are introduced to Gemma, and she is going to all of these different rooms. And it seems like she is outie Gemma. Like, this is
Hmm.
not that she remembers Mark, she knows everything about her past, but she's going into these different rooms that are named after all of the different projects that the refiners are seen refining throughout this show.
Throughout the show.
So one
Yeah.
of them is Allentown, there's Cairns, Drainsville, Sienna. I just jotted down some of them.
Water.
Yeah,
There's a whole bunch of them.
yeah, and of course one of them is Cold Harbor,
Yep.
which we'll get into a little bit later. Obviously, that is the big one. But she goes into these rooms dressed differently, and is put in these seemingly innocuous situations. So
Hmm.
one of them, she's going to the dentist. One of them, she's on a plane. One of them, she's writing thank you cards at Christmas. And
Yep.
the thing that I kind of got out of this was that this might be a test of a new form of severance where you're not just split into two people, you're split into as many people as you want, right?
Hmm.
She goes to the dentist and all she remembers is the dentist. She is getting her teeth done over and over and over
Yep.
again. And then, of course, after they're asking, like, do you have any feelings about that room? And they're trying to see if maybe she's bleeding through, like those memories are bleeding through to her
Yep.
outie. The other one, of course, is the pretty comedic plane turbulence. uh and then
Yeah.
and then the last one is where she's writing Christmas cards.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I noticed about the Christmas card one specifically is that the setup of the room and the Christmas tree was the same as what we saw in the sort of Mark and Gemma
Yes.
story. It was like their Christmas tree.
Yep.
So my theory on all of this is that they are kind of tempting her with memories of her past
Hmm.
to try and break the severance. They mentioned something in the episode about the severance barrier.
Yeah.
And I think that when you split it so many different times, it's harder to keep everything contained in its own little
Hmm.
container, which is interesting because what are all of the refiners doing on the severed
Oh,
floor? They are
they're taking
putting
stuff and
numbers
putting
into
things
a
in
little container.
containers.
And
Yeah.
so my thought there is that any time that sort of it bleeds through, the refiners are actually containing that. They are refining the severance chip
Yep.
so that it contains those memories and doesn't cause the sever to break.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I got out of all of this. Another little reference or like temptation that she would have is when she's leaving the room, the doctor guy says like, I love you, and then she doesn't say it back, and then
Hmm.
he's like, I love you, which is exactly what she did to Mark
Yep.
in, the prior or the past, right?
Yeah.
That's what I got out of all of this. I Is that kind of where you saw that going?
For the most part, yes. So I work in software, and a big part of working in software is you have a team of people who, when you're working on something new, their whole job is to try to break it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out any way possible to find something that doesn't work in this whole severed thing, which is interesting.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, they in some way it's like it's bug fixing, right?
it's
It's
beta testing. Yeah.
refining, right?
Yep. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. And it was interesting because at the end of a lot of those sessions, whether it was the dentist or whether it was the note writing, they asked, how are you feeling? And she's got
Mhm.
physical pain. She says, my mouth hurts, my hand hurts, or whatever,
Mhm.
but she can't remember why it hurts.
Right.
So the brain is separating and doing something else, but the physical is the same. And if I had to guess, what Lumen is trying to do is get it to a point where you don't even feel the physical pain
Hmm.
afterwards.
Gotcha.
Um, and the whole time I was just like, my spirit was just crushed for her because
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, what a lot of weird shit to have to go through.
Yeah, and we'll go through in the past section kind of how we got to this point, but
Yeah.
a couple other things that we were introduced to here were kind of the counterparts of the four macro data refiners, who are just like watching them on the computer screen the whole time.
Yeah. It's like a who
Uh,
watches the Watchmen kind of thing.
exactly, yeah. Who
Yeah.
refines the refiners,
Yep.
right? So yeah, I was getting the same vibes there. The
It's
other
a
thing that
big
they
lumen
mentioned.
tiramisu, Shane. It's just got tons and tons of layers to it.
It's like an onion. Not everybody likes onions, but uh, anyways, the other thing that we get, of course, is the tragic ending where the doctor, which, oh, also I'll mention that in all of these scenes, the doctor guy is played by the same person. So
Yep.
like the dentist is just a dyed hair version of the guy, and I believe it's Robbie Benson is the actor.
Yep.
The must he's got the mustache on. He's like, why? Drummond's like, why are you wearing that ridiculous sweater? Because he's really playing the part of
Yep.
each of these different rooms, but it's just the one guy who's going into
Flight
to all
attendant,
the
I
different
think
rooms.
probably too in the plane
Yes,
crash
exactly. Flight
sequence.
attendant
Yeah.
was the
Yeah.
same. Was the
All the same
same.
guy.
Yeah, and we'll come back to him later because
Which,
he does show up again in this
yeah.
episode.
But that also
In a,
feels like another part of the test to see if the severed brain can make
correct.
the connection between that one constant in
Yep.
all of those different scenarios, and it can't. So
Yep.
that's good.
Yeah.
That's very good.
It's actually similar to one of the best episodes of Lost, which is actually called The Constant,
Huh.
in
All right.
which, in order to get your brain from going crazy, you have to find the constant between the two timelines, and
Oh, okay.
similar vibes here,
Well, that's good.
except
And I
kind
mean,
of the opposite. They're trying to break it with the constant, right?
Damon Lindelof is apparently a big fan of this show,
I
as
saw
we
that. I
learned
saw
this
that.
week. So that's pretty cool. So
Yep. But then, of course, the ending, which is her breakout scene, where she hits the doctor with the chair, and then, she's creeping through. First
yeah,
off, great lighting, where all the lights
amazing.
would turn on as they were walking down. It's
So
such a
cool.
cool, yeah. It
And
almost
probably
reminds
inexpensive
me,
because they're just motion
yeah,
sensor lights. That's all it
yeah.
is.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of, like, playing those old, like, stealth Game Boy games where, like, you had to stay out of the radius of
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
like, bad guys. Kinda reminded me of that. But anyway, she gets to the elevator, which is, of course, the Irving
Of
elevator that
course
we
it
have
is.
seen. Yes, of course it is, right? And then sh in this case, she goes up the elevator instead of down the elevator.
Yeah.
And then when she gets up there, she is introduced to Mr. Milchick, who I don't know how he wasn't like sweating or panting, because he surely would have had to sprint to
Sprint.
that
Yeah.
hallway to intercept.
He's
But
got
he
good
just
cardio,
tells
man.
her, "Sorry, dude, go turn right back around." And
Yeah.
Audi Gemma realizes there is no escape for her. She is trapped there until they are done with her, which was devastating, right? And
Yeah.
the cross cutting between this scene and the scene where Mark discovers that she dies in the
Yeah.
car crash. There was one shot where it had them cross dissolved and they were on either side
Hmm.
of the screen. And I was like, it's such a great, metaphor.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they have that shot of Mark, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, where it's
Sure.
kind of
Yeah.
half dark and half light. It's just like
Hmm.
very intentionally visual
And
about
then they
that.
do the inverse of it, where it's the back of Mark's head, but it says the elevator shutting on her
Yep.
face, and her face lands right where the fucking hole is in the
Yep.
back of his head after he gets severed. It's like they're doing some really artistic shit here, man.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. I probably missed a few details, but I
Oh,
think we got the gist of it for that section,
yeah.
right?
However, if we miss something, which we always do, drop
Yes.
us a comment and let us know.
Yes.
Because God, this is a lot to digest, and it's only been 45 minutes since we
I,
finished watching the episode.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I think I had like 4 straight pages of things I wrote down, and like organizing it was crazy. But
yeah,
anyways, let's get to the other section, which is the Mark and Gemma origin story.
yeah.
So we get their meeting where they are donating blood. Again, a good cross cut between
Mhm.
the blood with Gemma on the testing floor and then the
Yep.
past sequence. But was the lumen blood work draw, was that also lumen in the school, or was that just after the crosscut? I
Oh, I don't
couldn't
know. That's
make
a
it
good
out.
question.
My thought was that kind of lumen runs everything, so
It,
like
it
of
kind of
course
feels like they do.
they would
Yeah.
run the school and they run that, yeah. So my thought was they were drawing blood, and maybe they found something in her blood that was different, and through all the testing and
Yeah, maybe.
whatever.
That's certainly
uh
true. Didn't think about that.
but then we must review, Corey, the next sequence of events, which I will refer to as Dead Wife Montage. Every dead wife must have a dead wife montage. And I thought this one was very creatively done. Lots of French music.
Yeah.
We
Yep.
had the typical, they're in bed together, the white sheets, the light pouring in.
Mhm.
These are typical, like, if you don't do those, you don't have a dead wife
Yep.
montage.
It's got to be
Uh,
backlit. That's
yeah,
honestly
has
the
to
most
be
important
backlit.
thing. You got to
Yes,
get
they're
some
kissing with the sun
bright light in
between them.
there.
Like
Yeah.
that's a good shot that you
Oh
got to put
yeah.
in there. So I thought,
Yep.
they're hitting all the marks of the dead wife
Yep.
montage. They know what they're doing, but they're putting a
People
little spin on it.
people dancing, stuff in the backyard, flowers, typical love shit, right?
I'm
You
going
got you
with
got to have all that.
yes, 4.5 dead wives out of 5 for the dead wife montage.
Okay.
Tastefully done.
Yeah, I'll go with a 4.25 Dead Wives, just to spite Letterboxd because they won't let me do quarter star ratings on
Yeah, I
there.
like that
So.
idea. I like that idea. But yes, so we get the great dead wife montage, and this is done very effectively to show they're
Sure.
in
Yeah.
love, right? That's what
Yeah.
we're getting out of this.
Yep.
Um, so we also get some great information about how close, Devin, Rickon, Mark,
Yeah.
and Gemma were. Especially, you get this cute little moment between Devin and Gemma where she
Man,
offers her a drink, and
it's
then
so good.
she kind of knows before she announces it just because she's
Mhm.
not drinking, right? And I thought that was great because it shows that they have camaraderie too. We've
Yeah.
seen on the outside outie world that Devin has said that she's close with Gemma, but now we get to actually see it,
Get to
right? We
see
get to
it. Yeah.
see some of those connections. Also, Rickon is a great outdoorsman, apparently, which is a total pivot from what he becomes after. I'm
Look
thinking
at him.
maybe this is like another commentary on how people change after trauma, right? Rickon went
Yeah.
into this writing zone, whereas and they don't do anything versus in the past they were climbing mountains and stuff.
Or look at Mark. He
Yeah.
was
Oh, of course.
outside and happy
Yeah.
and smiling
Yep.
and in love, and
Yep.
then it gets to the point where he can't take it and he gets his brain cut in half, basically.
Yep. But then we get to, of course, the drama of this flashback, which is
Yeah.
that they are trying to have a kid. It doesn't work several times, and then, of course, she gets pregnant, and she has a miscarriage, which was
Yeah.
a devastating scene, right?
Yeah.
Especially the way that it transitioned to that scene because she's very happy, and then it goes to the dark, the the tension of that shower scene. Uh, pretty pretty hard hitting stuff there,
Yeah.
I
There's a
thought.
transition in that too, where the shower water is going down, and then as it transitions back, the shower water is
Yes.
going from floor to ceiling, and then
Yes.
it swirls into the Lumen
Yes.
office. And I was just
Hmm.
like, "Get out of here, you guys! Y'all
Yeah.
crazy."
Yeah.
It's
My
really
wife
good.
mentioned in that scene, she was like, "Why is the water going the wrong way?" And then it switched. And I was like, aha, they know
Yeah,
what they're doing.
there was so much clever shit in this
Yeah.
episode. I
Yeah.
loved it.
But then they go to a fertility clinic, and
Yeah,
this is where I said we would come back around to it.
aha, you did.
It's a blink and you miss it moment, but the doctor that was on the testing floor walks right by them in the fertility clinic.
He sure
And
does.
so the thought is that this is some sort of recruitment center or something with Lumen. I mean, they
Yep.
kind of rule everything, right? So maybe
Yeah,
this is just another branch of their empire.
yeah,
But I thought that was that is one for the people that are watching very closely.
yeah. And it starts to really feel like one of those things where the antagonist, which we're assuming Lumen is basically the antagonist in this show at this point, that they have their hands in every cookie jar
Hmm.
and somebody everywhere is working for them,
Yep.
right? You can't escape it. Even if you try, the minute you have the idea, they've already had the idea 5 days ago and
Yep.
they're already in front of you. And that
Yep.
it just makes it feel like everything is closing in,
Yep.
which is fantastic.
Yeah. But a couple other things from this flashback sequence is that after that fertility clinic, she mentions that they get these flashcards and
Yeah.
drawing and stuff like that. Those flashcards were the same cards from O&D
Yes.
on the severed floor that we saw in season one,
Right.
and it's the Chikhai Bardo, which is the
Chikhai
name
Bardo.
of the name of the episode.
Yep.
But this is pretty interesting too, right? Because after that, it kind of feels to me like she's being recruited by Lumen at this point for Severance.
Hmm.
It's she goes in for the fertility thing and comes out kind of, you know, groomed in a sense.
Yeah.
Uh,
And the definition of the Chikhai Bardo too, because I googled it, is uh, it's the first moment of death. So it's experienced immediately after someone physically dies,
hmm.
and it's when the conscious separates itself from the body, which is pretty much what happens when somebody walks into one of those elevators.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
really clever stuff.
that is clever. I didn't make that connection. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
wild.
yeah. So then it's more of the same throughout. We get that Christmas tree that I mentioned that
Yep.
shows up in the testing floor, and then of course you get the scene where she leaves, which I'm taking this now as like she knows that she's going to get severed. Like
Yeah.
she
Oh
knows
yeah.
this is about to be a horrible moment for Mark. Although we don't know how much she knows, right? Does she know that she's not going to get to see Mark again at that point? I kind of think yes, based on how she makes him say "I love you,"
Hmm.
and I would think if she doesn't know it's the last time that she's going to see him, then maybe she wouldn't do that.
Sure. Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe I got out of it, but I did find it interesting because like maybe it is her choice to get severed as a way of coping with the
It,
infertility. And
It
then of
could
course
be.
Mark gets severed as a consequence of that.
Right. It could also be something where they've already got blood from her because they met at a blood drive.
Yep.
And now she's been to the fertility clinic where one of the doctors is the same guy from the testing floor. They could have, like you said, figured out that she's a prime candidate for something and said,
Correct.
hey, we're going to give you a boatload of money and we're going to promise you a better life to go do this thing, but nobody can know about it. We have to fake your death, all this other stuff. It's going to be horrible for your husband, but everyone's going to be in a better place because of it.
Yeah.
And she accepts it, but she can't tell Mark. So she's got to pull this charades thing. And then she knows him well enough personally to be able to manipulate him into staying home from something he doesn't
Right.
want to go to.
Right.
So that way she can go and do the thing.
Yeah. The sinister alternative is that they just kidnapped her and then faked her death. But
I mean,
it could
that could
be.
be true too.
Yeah. It's one of those, right? I like to think it's the more complex version of that, but maybe it's not, right?
Everything about this show makes me think that it's the more complex thing,
Yeah.
just
Yeah. I
based
would
on
think
what
so
they've
too.
done so far.
Yeah. Agree. But yeah, that's kind of it for the past. Again, probably missed some subtle details, but I think we got the gist of it.
Drop those
And
comments.
then, yeah, and then the third section is, of course, the present day, which is the smallest part of the episode, but
It
we do
is.
get a couple moments where it's Devin and Ragabi over Mark's unconscious body.
Yeah.
And Devin mentions that her plan is to talk to Innie Mark by going to the birthing center, where
Yep.
she said there was like an Innie house that triggered the Innies, and they can take him there and then flip the switch, and then it's
Yep.
Innie Mark. But Ragabi, of course, mentions that no, this is the only way to save Gemma.
Yep.
The other way will not work. And then Devin mentions that she's going to call Miss Cobell.
Yeah.
Uh, and I find this interesting because we haven't heard from Miss Cobell in a while. That makes me think the next episode is probably pretty Cobell focused. She
More than
probably
likely.
actually
Yeah.
does call Cobell. Otherwise, you wouldn't bring that up if it wasn't going to be important later.
Right.
But then Ragabi just pieces out. She's like, I'm out of here. Cobell's going to kill me.
Well, she says Cobell has been there since she was
She's a
born. She's a
soldier.
lifer. She's a soldier,
Hmm.
which is very telling.
Hmm.
We kind of had our assumptions
Yeah,
that
we
there was
got that
something
with
going on there, but
the shrine in season 1.
mhm.
But she seems to be having doubts, right? Because
Yeah.
she's got that breathing tube that apparently belonged to her mother or somebody close to her. And in the Lexington letters, it's mentioned that they had a defect in the breathing tube. So
Mhm.
it's possible that like Lumen accidentally killed her mom, but she's
Right.
also like brainwashed by Lumen, so she's
Mhm.
having those conflicting thoughts. So are we going to get a Kobelvig salvation story?
I mean, we might. We've been asking all season, who is it going to be? Is it going to be Milchick? Is it going to be Cobell? Is it going to be Helena? There's a bunch of people who could lead this revolution against Lumen. Another interesting tidbit is that Ragabi didn't know that Cobell no longer leads the Severed Floor.
Yes,
So
yes.
she's really unplugged from Lumen,
Yeah.
or she's playing everyone and she does know and she's playing dumb to it. You never
True.
know. We got to theorize on this show, Shane, or else people won't come back. So
I think we did the good theories with. I think we've hopefully figured out what the refining is doing. But of course, this show is probably going to throw us a curveball,
100%.
and it's not going to be at all what we thought it was. But that's kind of how I pieced together. This felt like a fever dream. There were just so many details coming at you at once, and then once you sit down and think about it, it all sort of makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. As it
This,
was happening, I was like, my brain can't process all of this
yeah.
information at the speed in which they're giving it.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of a movie that they've said that has inspired them throughout this show, which is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where
It's
things
great.
are cross-cutting and going in a million miles an hour.
Yep.
But then, once you slow down and kind of unravel it, it starts to make sense.
Yeah. So the big ending here is the nice dovetail to the beginning of the episode.
Correct.
So let's hear it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the ending is Mark finally wakes up, and night we do get some nice warm light, and the cinematographer has mentioned in the past that warm light kind of signals happiness, and cold
Mhm.
light is the sadness. But he wakes up, he's got warm light, and then of course we get the line, "Mark, where did you go?" And this is not the first time that this has happened in this season, where they've kind of started and ended the episodes on similar notes. I believe in one of the prior episode. It was the funeral episode for Irving, where Mark on the Innie side says, he's not dead, he's just not here.
He's just not
And
here.
then later in the episode, he says Gemma's not dead, she's just not here.
Mhm.
Similar thing here. You start with Gemma, where did you go? You end with Mark, where did you go?
Yeah,
Nice little full circle ending for this messy circle that we had.
extremely messy. Whoever's writing on this show, I don't care how much they're currently getting paid, they deserve a raise.
Yeah.
That's it. Just pay them
Yeah.
more. It's fantastic. It's really really sharp stuff. It's provocative. It makes you think. It makes you uncomfortable, and like for a viewer, that's all you could ask for.
Yeah, I think this episode specifically is what took it on the next level for me, where it was kind of operating on this very, very good level. And this is where it turns into sort of this elite prestige TV type of thing.
Yeah. Not to tease too much, but next week's episode is entitled "Sweet Vitriol,"
Okay.
and the log line is just "Discoveries are
Discoveries are
made."
made. Must be a big one if they're not going to tell us anything about
I,
it. The
I
photo
mean,
is just of Lumen
of Lumen
in the
from the
snow, so they're
outside, very far away. Yeah,
not going to show us anything. I think this is a Cobell episode, if I had to guess.
I like to think so. I think they've been slowly reminding us of her the last couple weeks, especially in this one. And we're overdue for her to come back. And we've only got what 8, 9, and 10. There's only 3 episodes left
Yeah.
for the season, so we have to start barreling towards what will inevitably be a cliffhanger. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. I
There's
think
no
we'll
way
get
there's going to be resolution here.
well, I think we'll get a solid resolution, but then more questions. I
Right?
think we might get a resolution as to like what Cold Harbor is, and my thought
Yeah,
is it's the eventuality of her severance chip.
yeah,
Maybe that's where they remove her severance chip and they
maybe.
use it
Yeah,
on somebody else, and she's done.
yeah. Dragging on the Cold Harbor thing to a third season would be silly when they've
Yeah,
said it's like 96 or 97% of the way
yeah. This
completed.
feels
That's
like the ticking time bomb for
yeah.
this season.
Yep. I agree. Man, we did it.
We did it.
We got
My brain's
through.
still spinning, but I think we made some sense of it. Hopefully.
I like to think so, but at the end of the day, it's really up to you guys who are watching. Drop us a comment below. Let us know what you thought. If we've helped you with this at all, if we've set your brains on fire with new theories and new thoughts and things that maybe you didn't see during the episode. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't to the channel already, and tap that notifications bell so that way you always know when one of these new videos pops up. Good Lord, I don't know if we're going to do anything between now and this time next week because my brain needs a vacation. But even if we don't, we will have another video same time next week covering episode 8, which, as we mentioned, is entitled Sweet Vitriol. So stay tuned for that and so much more. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video.